By now, you probably have heard a lot about the headline about Evergrande crisis. You know, everyone is talking about Evergrande, and Evergrande, right? And they always mimic Evergrande crisis to the Lehman Brothers collapse in 2008, whether the Evergrande crisis will actually destroy the entire system in China and also have a systemic effect in China and also all around the world. So here is my take, and in this video I want to share with you what exactly is Evergrande, right? And how does Evergrande get into this mess that it get into right now, and who is behind Evergrande, and what is the implication that I think possibly on China and also throughout the world. So who exactly is Evergrande, right? Evergrande is a second largest property developer in China, and it is listed in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol 3333 under the name China Evergrande Group. To give you a perspective, the share price of this company was about a year ago, I think it's around 20, and it went all the way down to $2.27 Hong Kong dollars. The highest, the shares was about 30 Hong Kong dollars, and right now it's $2.57. I couldn't stop myself, but I noticed that the ticker symbol for this company is 3333, which in Chinese is a pretty lucky number. As you know, during the Ant Financial IPO, when Ant Financial trying to make its IPO debut in both Shanghai Stock Exchange and also the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, the Ant Financial actually got the ticker symbol 688688. You know, Lok Fa Fa, which in Chinese means a very prosperous number. And I think they got the ticker symbol in Hong Kong Stock Exchange at 6688, Lok Fa Fa, which is also a very good number as well. 3 means 3333 is also a very valid number. In order for a company to actually get this number, it is not by chance or through ballot. You know, I don't think they're so lucky to actually get this number. They actually probably have a certain connection, influence and connection that enable them to actually choose this number, because everyone will be fighting for this number anyway. Track a little bit, but it is something that I found very entertaining when I saw this ticker symbol Evergrande Group. To give you a perspective, this company actually have grown tremendously. The company is actually a real estate company, but it is actually a conglomerate company. It doesn't only involve in the property development sector, although that is the majority of their business. They are also involved in the electric car, the EV, the electric car vehicle. They also have a theme park. They also does business. I think a long time ago they have a business in grain and oil. And also they have a soccer football club, and they also have a business where they run the mineral water and food business. It employs close to 200,000 employees, and they have about 4 million subcontractors working on the existing projects. To give you a perspective of how this company have grown, pretty impressive, I would say. In year 2011, the company's revenue itself is only roughly around 62 renminbi, which is about US dollar 9.58 billion. And right now, this year 2021, their revenue is a renminbi 463 billion, which is around US dollar 71.86 billion. You know, from 9.58 billion to 71.8 billion, it's over the last 10 years, is a compounding growth rate of about 23.2%, which is staggering. You know, to have a long period of time compounding at the 23% is just simply amazing. So who is behind the Evergrande? Evergrande is owned by Su Jiayin, which is right now a 62 years old individual. Is a philanthropist. Is one of the richest person in China. In fact, he is voted as the 3rd richest man in China by Forbes. And of course, his wealth dropped or dwindled a lot in year 2021 because the share price dropped around to $2.50 over cents in Hong Kong dollar. What is interesting about Su Jiayin is he's actually come from a relatively poor family, and he actually self-made to become one of the richest men in China. He worked in a cement production companies. He also worked in iron and steel companies as a production team leader, and he eventually started his own business through the China Evergrande Group. And many of the richest men in China right now, or the billionaire in China that you can see today, many of them grow their wealth through really alignment of interest with the Chinese Communist Party. And in particular, Su Jiayin grew the wealth during the premiership led by Wen Jiabao's time, where I think a lot of individuals also get pretty rich because of political ties and associated with Wen Jiabao's network. And during the last 50 years, when China tried to eradicate poverty or extreme poverty, China have did a few things to do that, and one of them is of course education, providing education to its population, providing them with some subsidies allowance, providing them with a better place to stay in. And one of the major things that China do is to boost their economy in order to eradicate poverty. By boosting their economy, it actually provided these people with job opportunities. And real estate, it's the driver of the economy back then. And Evergrande Group is able to ride that through that period. And that's why you can see the company have like a growth every single year. And it's amazing because this company is actually a profitable company and it makes profit every single year. So how come a company that is making profit every single year, but yet they came into a crisis right now, that a potential collapse? As a property developer, when they are trying to develop a township or develop a land, what they do is they do a lot of borrowings. And they grow their project from 1 project to 2 projects, 2 projects to 4 projects, 4 projects to 8 projects, 16 projects, 32 projects, and the projects keep going up, more and more projects. That's how they grow the size of the project. But at the same time, when they grow that, all of them are financed through debt, unless it was paid off, unless the debt was paid off before it moved on to the next project and paid off before they move on to the next project. Then if not, the debt will continue to accumulate over time. And when property prices continue to increase and there are demand for the property, then there will be no problem, because the land prices continue to increase, the property prices continue to increase, and there is still demand purchasing the properties. Then there will be no issue if it continue the same way, and you can continue to leverage more and more and grow your company. However, once there is an overhang in the property sector, once the supply outweighs the demand, the prices will stabilize. And suddenly they realize that some of these property prices is priced too high, and the developer will have to cut down the property price. And when demand is not as good as it projected, that's when they have an overhang in the property sector. And when that happens, the company that have huge debt find themselves having difficulties trying to pay off the debt. So as an investor, you must be asking, Ken, how come a company can continue to borrow the money? If they continue to acquire asset, they can continue to borrow the money. Yes, it was the case, and many of these property development company in China are over leveraged. And the recent China's implementation to curb this property development company from over leverage that might have a collapse in the financial institution, what they did is they created what they call the 3 red line in China. When the Chinese Communist Party imposed the 3 red line condition, it actually curbed these property development company from actually continue to finance their project. So what exactly is this 3 red line, right? One of the 3 criteria they have is, the first criteria is they must have a liability over asset ratio of less than 70%. And in the case of Evergrande's liability to asset is about 82.5%, which means they have 82% of their assets is actually comprises of liabilities. One of the other condition of the second red line is a net gearing ratio of less than 100. And in the case of Evergrande have a debt to equity ratio of 140%, failed terribly. The last thing, the third red line, is cash over short-term debt of more than 1x, which means you must have more cash than what in the bank, the cash and cash equivalent in the bank, that is more than what your short-term debt is. And in Evergrande case, Evergrande only have 0.36, failed. And you can see Evergrande failed the 3 red line badly. And because of that, the Evergrande is unable to borrow more, even though they might have assets, but they are unable to pledge this asset to borrow more to continue to pay the interest or pay the installment for the short-term investment, and therefore they suddenly find themselves having a liquidity crunch. the three red line is actually a very good thing that the Chinese government have actually implemented on all these property developer, because many property developer in China actually it's highly leveraged, and by imposing these three red line, these three conditions, that these property developers are forced to deleverage the companies, and they are forced to pare down the company by cutting off their non-core assets. For example, in Evergrande case, right, a property development company has actually gone into electric vehicles and so on and so forth. So Evergrande also right now trying to kind of sell off their non-core asset to pay off their debt, because if you have more and more debt, and once this property development fail, it actually will spiral to the bank as well. And this implication, this Evergrande crisis, if you think about it, it doesn't just affect the property the company itself, or the 200,000 employees that they hire, or the 4 million subcontractors who might lose the job. Evergrande have also received deposit money from buyers themselves. About 1.5 million property was pre-sold, which means they have already sold the property. Some of them paid 100% before the building was being built. Some of them paid 30% before the building was being built. So Evergrande have already collected the money. Despite Evergrande having a larger asset base, Evergrande assets right now is sitting at 367 billion US dollar versus the total liability of 300 billion, which means if everything in the Evergrande's books is correct, I'm just saying if everything in Evergrande's books is correct, there is no misstatement, then in fact Evergrande should be able to pay off all these liabilities. So out of these 367 million of total assets sitting in the books of Evergrande, there are probably some of them are of course accounts receivable that they have built that they haven't collected from the buyers or from the bank, or some of them are the real assets are really the investment assets, which means that they have investment in a lot of other non-core business such as the EV, the insurance business, and so on and so forth. That is there, they can actually use it and dispose of to generate cash. Of course, the majority of the assets are really I think it's really these three categories of asset, which is really undeveloped land for a property developer. For the property developer, they, as a part of their land banking strategies, they probably have bought a lot of lands that has not been developed. And for this land that is undeveloped right now, they probably could sell it at maybe slightly below the market value, which means they would take a cut. They would be selling it at a discount in terms of a fire sale. If they want to get rid of these properties as soon as possible so that they can pay down their debt or pay the interest, then they will probably need to take a haircut or they would probably be selling it at a certain discount from the current market value. If this asset was purchased many years ago, it might be they might still make a profit out of it, but if they have purchased in the recent years where the land prices have actually increased and developer is paying higher and higher land prices, and right now when the property sector is overhang, this undeveloped land might not be valued as much as it is, and if they are selling it right now in a fire sale condition where they will be going to sell below their cost of purchase, then they will also incur a loss. The other categories of asset that is sitting in there is probably semi-developed properties or semi-developed projects. I mean the project have progressed, but the progress halfway that hasn't been completed. And in this case, I don't think it's a huge problem or a huge issue for them, because this project probably with a lift of finger by the Chinese government, they can ask any property development to take over the project, which means pump in money to actually continue and complete the project and then hand over this property to the buyer themselves. And this actually kind of take care of the social interest of the buyer that have already pre-purchased these properties, and they can also realize the profit from this project as well. And last but not least is our completed properties. As in any property developer, they might not sell out all their houses. You know, some of these projects are not the sales are not so good, so they actually keep some of their properties. And these properties itself, if the property is situated in location which are high demand, then there's no issue to dispose it of. But if these properties are sitting, most of these properties are sitting in township where in China, there's a lot of so-called ghost town, property that have built high-rise, but no one is staying there. And if this majority of these completed properties are in these areas, then they have problem getting rid of them as well. So if on an overall basis, although they have 367 billion in total assets, we couldn't assure that they are able to dispose of everything at that book value. So what other implication could there be? And for this company, like a property development company, it doesn't only affect the real estate market or the bank itself only, right? It also affects, because what happened is when the crisis happened to Evergrande, such a big, gigantic conglomerate, and if they are unable to pay the loan, the bank would also have increase in the non-performing loan. And it also affect the upstream and downstream of the entire supply chain. The upstream being the raw material. In order to build a building, we have to have a lot of subcontractors, electrical works, steel, cement, bricks, and so on and so forth. And each of these segment of the economy have a segment of the sector have actually their own factory, their own plant, their own machineries to build them, and their own workers as well. So if these projects are failed or abandoned, it affects the entire value chain as well. And of course, on the downstream, it also affect the sales and marketing. It probably affect a little bit of course on the bank itself, because the bank loan to the buyers and so on and so forth. So with the project's property overhang, it also affects banks' lending growth as well. So it also affects insurance, which means lesser property for sale, lesser people demand for house insurance, just as an example. So it does have a spiral effect in the economy. But if Evergrande is the only company that have this financial crisis, I don't think it is going to be a systemic issue create a systemic issue in China or even around the world. I think it will be well contained in China alone. And also, with a few lift of finger, some of the Chinese government can just go out there and ask some of these cash-rich tech company to buy up some of this land for their own manufacturing. They can actually really strip off some of these core assets, and asking Evergrande to strip off the core assets and sell it to those people who are their core business is doing that industry. So I don't think there is a huge problem. Even the Chinese government can just with a lift of finger ask some of the creditors, you should stop asking Evergrande for money right now, and you should actually accept whatever interest that is paid, or maybe get a haircut of your debt. So there are many possibilities on how to restructure the company, given that right now in the books itself, the total assets of Evergrande is actually much higher than the total liabilities. I think they are able to actually go through this crisis, although it will be many of the assets will be stripped off. One note of caution is because of the three red line criteria set by the government, Chinese government, to kind of deleverage this property developer, I think the major question is, will there be only the Evergrande crisis happen in China, or will there going to be more of the similar like property development company which run into the same situation like what Evergrande ran into right now? So I think that's a big question, or a crystal ball for people to answer, and only we will know it when it comes. But on Evergrande itself, I think if you just look at Evergrande itself, I don't think it is such a huge issue that will really cause a systemic issue in China. That's at least my take. Thank you very much for watching this video, and in the second part of this video, I would explain what does all this news means to us as an investors, and whether we as an investor can actually spot that Evergrande that is going into crisis before it actually goes into crisis, which means whether you can avoid buying into Evergrande. And I can tell you, just to a very simple financial analysis, you can actually spot this disaster before it actually happens. So look out for part 2 of this Evergrande video. If you benefited from this video so far, a small favor to ask from you is please help me like this video, or click the share button here, or subscribe to my YouTube channel so we can help empower more individuals with financial education.